morning, everyone, and welcome to ATARC's 2022 Cloud Migration Virtual Summit. For those of you who do not know, my name is Hannah Folick, and I am an event coordinator over here at ATARC, and I will be emceeing today's event. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. ATARC is a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. They provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. Thank you to our partners over at Pure Storage for helping us create today's summit. Truly great partners of ATARC. Additionally, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoy this great and informative day. We would also like to remind you that after each panel, there will be time for a Q&A. Please place all questions you have in the Q&A box on your screen. During the panels, we will be asking our amazing speakers the questions you want answered. I also want to remind you to answer all of the poll questions throughout today's panels if you would like to be eligible for CPE credits. Up first, I would like to introduce our visionary keynote, Skip Jens. Skip is the Cloud Products Manager for the Information Technology category at Federal Acquisition Service for the United States General Services Administration. Skip, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and good morning, everybody. Skip Jens is my name with GSA about 8 years. I'm the lead for the GSA schedule cloud special item number, which is the subset of the GSA schedule that contains only cloud offerings. I help vendors get on the schedule. I help agencies figure out how to buy cloud computing. But before I get started, I have to satisfy my governmental duty. Government regulations require that I do two things before we start. First is I have a confession to make. I am currently wearing no socks. Secondly, I have to tell a small, mildly humorous anecdote that has to do with the subject at hand, and that is cloud. You know, about 10 or 15 years ago, my son was 9 or 10. And he pestered me for $10 a month to sign up for an online cloud-based account for his gaming console. He wanted to fight the monsters online. And this was pretty early in the game console world. And I was looking over his shoulder one day and saw he was making good progress in fighting the bad guys. They were all robots. He was not fighting against other players online. It was actually a cooperative game where he would fight alongside other online players against the bad guys. And I said to Max, I said, look, Max, over there, there's another character. His attack, defense, speed, and armor capabilities seem to be complementary to yours. Why don't you open up a chat window, look at this new platform and what have you, this beauty of cloud. And like only a 9 or 10-year-old can, he said to me, Dad, he only speaks French. So he's playing, this 9 and 10-year-old is playing worldwide. Using the cloud, and this is 10 or 15 years ago. It's amazing how this technology has been adopted. Compare that, for instance, to over the history of technology, to other technologies and their rapid rate of adoption. Can you name the most rapidly adopted technologies of the 20th century that achieved over 95% penetration of United States households in the 20th century? If you said radio, you're almost right. Radio took 22 years from 1925 to achieve over 95% penetration in US households. And that's at a time when, many of us have parents that were alive at the time of Pearl Harbor, 1941. And at that time, about half the households in the United States had no electricity, most of them rural. And the radios were bought and powered by batteries, radios not being a terribly inexpensive thing at the time. And if you said color TV, you matched my research. It took only 19 years from 1966 for color televisions to penetrate greater than 95% of US households in the 20th century. We all think that it might be computers, it might be the internet, but mine was a trick question. Neither computers nor the internet have ever penetrated much more than only 90% of US households, and radio and color TV are pretty much at 99 or 100%. So compare that to adoption by government of cloud technology. It's accelerating. Spend by the federal government is only increasing. Look at the government cloud expense numbers from 2020, $6.5 billion, 2021, $8.2 billion. We're on track for in 2022, it was over $11 billion. So despite all the hard work and hurdles there are to adopt cloud technology, it is occurring, and it's occurring quickly. So the questions that come up for you as government technology adopters, what is the nature of your cloud journey? Does your agency have a roadmap for adopting cloud going forward? How is cloud being used by your agency as a mission accelerator? It's not, people are figuring out that with so many upfront costs with migration and whatnot, it's not only about saving money by buying cloud on a metered basis, it's also about the agility, the ability to scale up, scale down. After all, we're working right now at GSA with Defense Department agencies trying to figure out how to buy cloud to store their body-worn camera footage. Can you imagine, first of all, that video is a space hog. It requires so much storage per frame, per minute of video footage. Can you imagine the hundreds or thousands and thousands of body-worn cameras that are out there, all of which want to upload footage? Isn't the cloud the perfect repository for that, because how it can expand so quickly? Just a quick example, not so much about saving money, although money could be saved, I'm sure. It's more and more people are recognizing that it's more about the agility. How is your agency consolidating IT gains made in the past couple of years, especially when the rush was on during the pandemic, when telework became so much more widespread? How is that being consolidated into a permanent footprint in your agency? A very important topic is education. How is education being cloud education being formalized? How are you training your workforce? How are you growing the agency's cloud talent pool? It's tough out there to attract and retain qualified and good cloud specialists. Every agency also should be educating their acquisition folks. It's not an easy lift for acquisition. There are a lot of cloud acquisition hurdles to clear. There's the problem of choosing a contract type. How do you fit a time and materials model or a firm fixed price model into a cloud that is often where charges often accrue only with usage, and when a year's worth of cloud expenses cannot readily be predicted to the dollar throughout a fiscal year? How do people change their contracts to allow for scope changes? The technology is changing so quickly. How can you write a contract for specific technology when other more new, better, faster cloud technologies are coming online all the time? How do you increment your funding? How do you commit funding to a contract too low, and you run up against the Anti-Deficiency Act. Too high, and you run into the problem of deobligation and possibly use or lose funding. There has been over the years a patchwork of recommendations made, none of which touch the FAR, none of which give absolute regulatory cover to solve any of these problems. There was Cloud First in 2010. There was Fedramp stood up in 2011. There was the Best Practices Guide that CIO Council came up in 2012. Best Business Practices Manual published by GSA in 2016. DISA with the Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide in 2017. The Castle Guide by the Internet Agency Cloud Center of Excellence, CCOE, 2017. Cloud Smart Policy, 2018. Some of these didn't address contracting for cloud at all. The closest I think to come was DoD's Section 809 panel that actually recommended a creation of a new category of services, new PSC codes, new contract type added to the FAR, which of course is, don't hold your breath to change acquisition regulations. Well, that's why GSA's move in last December 2021, signing that acquisition letter. The senior procurement executive, Jeff Kosis, signed this acquisition letter that gives regulatory cover to agencies to buy cloud on a consumption basis. This is kind of a first, in my opinion. Sure, agencies can do this today by workarounds with the FAR, employing a time and materials model, a firm fixed price with a not to exceed CLIN and so forth. But this is the only regulatory cover, I believe, that has come online since cloud came to government. The acquisition letter talks about a new task order type, not a contract type, but a task order type called a requirements task order, which allows for incremental funding, which gets around the Anti-Deficiency Act versus the deobligation and use or lose pitfalls. The acquisition letter applies only to the GSA schedule. Shameless promotion of the cloud SIN. It applies only to the GSA schedule cloud special item number. And all a vendor has to do, the purchasing agency has to do nothing. All the vendor has to do is accept the schedule refresh that occurred on June 30th of this year, and that clause, those acquisition letter clauses, automatically become effective with that vendor's contract. The order activity then may depend on that clause being in effect, since the vendor's contract with GSA does take effect in that manner. So there is some hope that there may be some regulatory cover for cloud consumption based billing after all. The acquisition letter text is available at GSA's Cloud Information Center at cic.gsa.gov, where you can also find a statement of objective templates that help people figure out how to write up their requirements. I'll close with what Mark Twain has to say about cloud and email. With email, look at us go. Sure, there were business letters written in the past, but now we write business letters to people that, well, until telework, used to sit down the hall from us. And that is, don't fire off that letter in haste. As Twain said, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had had more time. So with that, I'll turn it back to Hannah and enjoy today's presentations.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a great keynote with some incredible insight. Up next will be our first panel for the day, where we have Jory Heckman moderating. Jory is a reporter over at Federal News Network. Jory, please take it away.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks everyone for tuning in for the first panel of the morning here. Happy to keep the momentum going here, and please do keep questions rolling in throughout the conversation here. I want to make sure that we have time to address everyone's questions during the conversation here. And also please respond to the poll questions. We'll have 3 of them throughout the panel. That's essential to getting your CP credits for this. And without any further ado, I am going to introduce our fantastic lineup of panelists here. We have Brian Conrad, the Acting Secure Cloud Portfolio and Fedramp Director at the General Services Administration, GSA, well represented during today's summit. We have Heather Kowalski, the Chief Information Officer for the National Central Bureau of Interpol at the Justice Department. We have Sid Sripada, the Director of Cloud Adoption and Infrastructure Optimization at GSA. And we have Conrad Bovell, the Director of the Information Systems Security Division at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services over at HHS. Everyone, thanks for joining me. I'll give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves a little more fully. But by way of that introduction, let's just get the conversation started here. Tell me in that intro, if you could please, just why your agency is moving to the cloud. Brian, let's start with you.
Good morning, Jory. Thank you to ATARC for having me. It's always great to get out and talk about Fedramp and the way that Fedramp can enable agencies and cloud service providers to do what they do best. And that is exactly what Fedramp does with regard to cloud migration. We don't do any cloud migration, but what Fedramp does is we have a marketplace full of commercial cloud services that have a Fedramp authorization that have been signed off by either the Joint Authorization Board or an agency that have a standing agency authority to operate, that allows a broad marketplace of agencies to pick from different capabilities, different services to use, and that will enable their migration. Moving from one cloud to another, we have to make sure that federal information is being protected all across the board. And that's what Fedramp does. That's how we enable cloud migration.
All right, great. Well, thanks for that, Brian. GSA certainly as that enabler across government for other agencies to move to the cloud. Sid, let's keep the GSA streak going here. Let's hear from you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks, ATARC, for having me. My name is Sid Sripada. I'm a director at IT Modernization Center of Excellence at GSA. We're also part of Technology Transformation Services. As you know, Fedramp is one of the biggest solutions that TTS offers. So is cloud.gov, so is login.gov. Really happy to have Brian on here as well. And Skip also alluded to some of the services that TTS offers. So a little bit about me. I've been at COE for about 2 years, but I come from 12 years of public sector modernization program experience previously. So COE in general, we actually partner with agencies to accelerate their transformation in lieu of giving them best practices, tools, and resources. And that's where we actually bridge the gap and bring in the industry, partnership. And we embed with the agencies that we work with, and look to get them to where they're looking to go, and partner with them in that fashion. TTS as a whole aims to design and deliver digital government to the American people, and TTS has all these different services, whether it be 18F, Presidential Innovation Fellows, Digital Core, and the solutions that we just talked about. So it's a wide area of services that actually deal with the cloud area as a whole. And working with our 20 plus clients, we actually see some patterns. We actually see some general challenges. Biggest one of them are, to name, acquisition, contracting, lack of IT skills, and keep the upskilling as cloud and security focus area changes and shifts, and also how to effectively manage their cloud environment and handle the complexity of migrating legacy applications to the cloud environment, and maintain the funding, the operations, and the security all within the field of vision, so that the agency can take ownership of the new target environment. When it comes to pandemic specific challenges that we face in the field is, it's the pandemic definitely forced everybody to pretty much pivot to support into a disaster response posture, and that became the criticality. And cloud migration continues to deliver on this long-term investment, but also it has some short-term gains when we see some shoring up that we could do, and also how we could build cloud services around the edges of these systems that they already have in place, and increase capacity and responsiveness, and that way shore up the disaster recovery and also shore up all the remote work that's been happening across the federal agencies. Overall, the theme that we've seen from the recovery to the pandemic and in general, the challenges of cloud migration is the cloud as a whole, as Skip mentioned, is the enabler of innovation. And innovation is happening across the board in the federal government. And it helps the mission critical tools and services, and also paves the way to save costs across the board as one of the critical tools the CIOs have in their arsenal. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for that, Sid. And Conrad, over to you. In terms of CMS and everything that you guys are up to, what's the cloud migration journey look like for you?
Thank you very much, Jory and ATARC, for allowing me to participate in this wonderful discussion about cloud. And me as a cyber defender, my experience is a little unique in that from before CMS, I actually worked with at the time it was called the Defense Security Service, where I was the chief of computer network defense, but it's now been renamed the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, and was as the CMD lead on the forefront of the agency's movement to the cloud, and seeing a lot of the challenges that occurred at that time early on, and listening to Skip mention some of the documentation and the guidance, especially the DISA security guidance for cloud adoption. Those things really shaped a lot of my vision of what I thought cloud migration should look like. But then, having come to the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services and looking at its mission in the healthcare arena, looking at the support for Medicaid and Medicare recipients, as well as CHIP and other programs, and recognizing that the organization has to be agile in its approach for delivering services to the over 65 million customers that it has. We realized very, very early on that cloud adoption was going to be an area that would help the organization in delivering those critical services that the American people rely upon the Centers for Medicare and Medicare to provide to them. So there has been a lot in the way of very positive things that have happened. And as Sid noted, the pandemic has actually accelerated a lot of that because there are a number of areas where the organization said they just made an executive decision to do certain security login aspects, leveraging cloud technologies, which supported the organization with 100% telework. When you're dealing with VPNs and you realize the saturation numbers and you're having to do it, in a very short term, you need to expand your thought in terms of what we can leverage in order to support supporting the organization as well as the customers, the American people. So there's been a huge jump in that regard. And in terms of the organization's effort to support the different business units within the organization in making it easier to actually get to the cloud. So I'll talk more about that once we go through the process. But we made quite a bit of headway. There's quite a bit there.
Okay, a good preview of what's to come down the throughout the conversation here, Conrad, and we will conclude with the intros here with Heather. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on at your section of DOJ.
Good morning, and thank you to everyone. Truly appreciate the opportunity to be here. Interpol Washington is a very small component of a very large agency, yet we have a very large mission, and it's to connect the 18,000 domestic law enforcement entities with the approximately 200 international entities. Unlike TV, movies, books, we don't have agents jetting across the planet, Interpol agents. We literally are data brokers. We are sharing data from one group to another. And sometimes it's as dynamic as we miss the bad guy at the airport. Can you catch him when he lands in your country? It can be, my kids saw somebody make a threat in a video game chat room, and can we track that down? Or it could be, here's some information that might help you as you examine the crime activity, the criminal activity in your own country. Unfortunately, as a small component of a very large agency, we tend to be a rounding error where budget is concerned. So while all that we've heard so far are the fabulous technical reasons for cloud, all of which I'm really looking forward to truly benefiting from, the compelling argument that I had to make was, I can't afford to have operational costs and then every fourth or fifth year have ginormous capital expenditures to replace my on-prem equipment. And if you have a very large budget, if you have a lot of locations, you can kind of smooth that curve over your locations. But when you have a single location and a very small budget, it's a definite noticeable spike in what your expenses are. So looking to the cloud to smooth my curve, my financial spending, and make that an operational expense, at the same time having the flexibility that we just talked about. So looking forward to the upcoming questions, and thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for telling us a little bit more about your agencies and how it intersects with our topic here of cloud migration. Heather, I'll stay with you for just a moment here. In terms of these, improved workflows, in terms of the collaboration that you mentioned in your intro, can you just tell me a little bit more about how the cloud has been essential to making these things better and more effective?
The critical part for us is we have been hampered by a very old system, and to put it into perspective, it's 10 years old. So even if it had been a gold standard 10 years ago, we all can make comments on what it's like now. And let me tell you, it was not the gold standard 10 years ago. And what ends up happening is there's this need, it's this Frankenstein's monster. And you need to be able to pull and decompose this architecture and start doing your replacement. And that's very difficult to do when you're tied to very limited hardware restrictions. So looking to the cloud, it allows us to pull apart our existing system, build in new components, kind of rub it all together, and have this, I don't want to call it a play space, but essentially a workspace where we can kind of expand everything, do the magic we need to do, and then put it back into the space that it really needs, without incurring, I need to go buy another physical device to give me the space. The second part of it is, in addition to this modernization transformation effort, is, as you might imagine, we are data intense. And increasingly, it's not just documents that are coming our way. We heard in the keynote about body-worn cameras. Start to think about the videos that are now being sent worldwide. You have to put security protections on them. There are specific privacy requirements that go into receiving data from international partners. All of that adds to the load that you're trying to accommodate. And again, you simply can't do that in an on-premise environment with the constraints that come with that hardware.
All right, thanks for that, Heather. And just little follow-up there, because I want to keep the momentum going here. In terms of the data piece of things, in terms of knowing what you've got, doing the data inventories and doing those fundamental steps before moving to the cloud, what's the progress like on that effort?
It's kind of a mixed bag. We have been focusing on taking the information we need at the moment and moving that over, because we're also doing an effort to make sure we're only moving the information we have to. Again, as a small agency, people tend to wear multiple hats, and that becomes a problem with things like records management. Is this a record that has reached the end of its life, the end of its retention period? So we're attempting to use sort of a DevOps thought. Let's just do everything better as we take a step forward. Does it come with us? But I will say the critical part for us is that ability to expand and surge, and then reduce back to what is a normal load as we go through those exercises.
Okay, and Conrad, you were saying just a moment ago, 65 million customers. That is, you know, an unfathomable amount of data, it seems, to make sense of. How has the cloud been able to make CMS more effective at what it does?
Well, given the size of the organization in terms of its customer base, not only in terms of the millions, again, over 65 million customers that we serve, but also the budget that runs through it. Like, I'm the lead for security for a financial system that processes over $1.5 trillion a year. That's trillion. So there is a tremendous amount of scrutiny that the organization has. And we are also subject to a lot of legislative actions, and we have to respond to those in a timely fashion. And that means that we have to be agile. Now, our previous narrative was that, you know, we had our data centers and the like. And then with, you know, looking at, take an example, a legislative action that changed the whole dynamic of how the organization leveraged technology to support service delivery. You look at the Affordable Care Act. All of a sudden, we went from having our data center and having all the compute and data storage resources necessary to support the organization's efforts. And then all of a sudden, we're told, okay, you need to support this. And every fall, you're going to have this huge spike where millions of people are going to be accessing your resources in order to get this critical area for their medical coverage. So seeing that and all of the issues that happened in the beginning, because I know that's a very, it was a very public thing during the Obama administration with the rollout of the system to support the Affordable Care Act and its failure on the front end. And the recognition that, you know what, we have to do this a lot better. We have to be more agile. We need to be able to spin up resources in order to support the business needs. And that's one of those things. It was a great demonstration, you know, for a lot of people. I wasn't with CMS at the time. It was a very hard lesson to learn, but they have taken it to heart and are using that as sort of propelling them into the cloud space. And right now, the organization, I'll give them a lot of credit. The CIO and the CISO have done an incredible job of creating CMS cloud environments where they've actually have CMS spaces in AWS as well as Microsoft Azure, where you can host your application in the CMS cloud. And there are significant benefits in that the organization, instead of you having to go out and do the research yourself and try to find opportunities and you know, the methodology and approach for getting to the cloud, CMS offers all of the services and resources to facilitate that. There are actually cloud ushers who support the business units who are seeking to move to the cloud. And again, you know, the old narrative of we have to buy enough resources, because Heather talked about this, you have to buy enough hardware to support your worst case scenario. so that you have all of this wasted resources where you spent all this money to develop the environment, to architect it and support the worst case scenario, which only happens for a short period of time. And then, as she noted, you're going to have to do a tech refresh on all of that. So the cost of that it just rises exponentially. So cloud allows us to be a lot more agile and responsive to the changing business and environmental needs of the organization. Again, that agility piece, being able to get the resources where they're needed so that we can positively affect the businesses that CMS operates.
Okay, and Sid and Brian, you know, you both, by virtue of being at GSA, have the kind of the government-wide view on things. In terms of the zoomed out picture here on all of this, you know, where do you see agencies seeing the most benefit, the most improvement in terms of making that cloud migration journey a top priority?
Sid, you want to go first?
Oh, sorry, you came off mute first. You go.
Okay. So, you know, the interesting thing about Fedramp is, you know, we sit at the nexus between cloud service providers who are innovating, you know, creating these great technologies, and the agencies who are addressing the challenges that they have, such as Heather mentioned, such as Conrad mentioned, you know, and just sitting in between that and seeing the great things the agencies can do with this wonderful technology. And, you know, it's great that Fedramp sits in that space to provide, you know, the secure cloud services, because, you know, everybody on the panel is concerned with protecting federal information, and it's our job to make sure that those tools are available for agencies to use. You know, the benefit of Fedramp is we reduce duplicative efforts. So when there's a cloud system in the marketplace that, for instance, Conrad or Heather want to use, that's Fedramp authorized, they don't need to go through the whole entire authorization process again, because there's a tried and true policy and program and standard behind those cloud services, saying that federal information is being actively taken care of and protected by the cloud service provider. That enables you know, the federal government to accelerate their cloud adoption, to accelerate their cloud migration by having those systems available. Presently, we have 271 cloud products in our marketplace, representing probably about 200 different vendors, because some vendors have multiple offerings in the catalog. But, you know, we're also understanding the need that agencies and government organizations have. We're also looking at ways to speed up getting cloud services into that marketplace and available for agencies to utilize.
Thank you. And yeah, if I may add to that, so what we're seeing is that, you know, the agencies that are actually investing in aligning the cloud and the business the most are getting a more bang for their buck. And not only that, but also sort of like the championing the alignment from across the board, in whether it's an agile DevSecOps standardization fashion or providing shared services fashion that that CMS is doing. And, you know, there is a bigger piece of this for service enablement, you know, with ATO modernization as well. So we see a lot of agencies that are investing a lot more time and effort upskilling their employees and making sure that there are training tracks that are aligning with their IDPs. And not only that, but also, you know, product-based thinking and you know, user-based design principles are being you know, utilized across the board, so that folks that are used to the legacy way of doing things, the legacy, you know, consumption of services, are now moving to owning more share of the products being delivered and services being delivered from the cloud as well. So I guess if change management has come a long way in successful, you know, adoption, as well as strategic communications from the get-go, during the migration, before the migration, and after the migration, as to what the target environment will look like and what the service consumption model will look like, and how the billing and the optimization will take place.
Okay, thanks for that, Sid. And I think we'll get to that change management piece in a little bit. But for the time being, Hannah, let's go to the first poll question for everyone, please. Have you migrated to the cloud? Yes, completely migrated. We are in the process of migrating. Not yet. We are talking about migrating. No, we have not yet started. I'll give everyone a second to fill that one out. All right, things are heading in the right direction here. Yes, completely migrated, or we are in the process of migrating. That is encouraging for sure. And, let's stay on that change management piece of things that you mentioned, Sid. Obviously, so many tech problems are the case here, it's not exclusively a tech problem. It's getting that buy-in from the workforce, having them understand the value proposition to things. So I'll throw this out to whoever wants to take the first crack at it here. Tell me a little bit more about how your agency is overcoming that change management piece of things.
I can take the first crack at that. CMS, one of the things that they've tried to promote is having an innovative mindset. And that can be very challenging, especially with government where everyone's so rote and risk averse. Trying to create a more risk averse culture and encourage an entrepreneurial culture and leveraging emerging technologies, they have done things to actually induce business owners to, as I noted earlier, leverage the CMS cloud. So they've actually done things to facilitate those discussions with the business owners so that they can upfront address a lot of the concerns that people have, especially with respect to security and the onboarding process, the leveraging technologies and the like, and doing a fantastic job of demystifying all of that. One of the unique things that they've done, the CISO has actually begun a process for what he calls the Rapid Ato process. Sid had mentioned opportunities that exist in that very burdensome process, because many people look at the ATO as this gigantic thing that is very burdensome. We have to do pages, 500-page documents. The SSP, which is like 80% of it, contains all of these details with respect to all of the controls that you have to speak to address security in your system. Well, one of the things that they've done was they've said for those organizational elements and business units that deploy their application to the CMS cloud, because of the services that the CMS cloud actually supports and presents to the system owner, you will be inheriting those. So all of a sudden, instead of you having to write all of the documentation for your ATO package, by mere deployment to the CMS cloud, you get the starter kit. You inherit a lot of the controls. You inherit the language supporting those controls so that your document, your ATO package contains documentation that's pulled from the organization. So that we go here, all of a sudden, instead of a 9-month to 1-year process in terms of capturing and testing and monitoring and doing all those things as part of your package, they've actually experimented and have been able to run through that entire process in a month. So imagine that, the burden of compliance. They're taking that and mitigating that. And that's a huge deal because every system owner has issues with the compliance narrative and going through the ATO process. And people just always go, I'm pulling my hair out. Oh, we have 400 more pages to go. So that alone, unburden, making it a process where they're doing the work for the organization. They're helping you and expediting your ability to deliver capability and services to the customers. And that's where the energy needs to be focused on developing solutions for delivery as opposed to documentation.
All right, that's welcome news there, Conrad. Thanks for sharing that. Heather, over to you in terms of the change management. How are you overseeing that element of things?
This is one where we're definitely encountering some challenges. We have a very manual process. Like I said, it's a 10-year-old system, so you can imagine just how ingrained those habits are. And so the fact that we're even looking at a new tool is throwing a lot of issues towards some of our staff. And we're looking at not just moving to the cloud, but also as a service solutions, which means we're essentially setting up an organization for a much more regular cadence of changes, because it's going to be driven by our partners and the changes they're making. Right now, we're focused on the change agents, those members of the teams, the operational teams who are ready for things to be different. And with them, we're trying to figure out the communication plan with those who are reluctant to go through the changes. But one of the things we're dangling in front of people is right now that we are really limited in the number of analytical tools we can use in terms of the automation we can do. And putting those in front of people, like, wouldn't it be great if the system did this part of your job for you, instead of coming into the office each day and starting a series of queries to see if names are appearing in databases. The system did that for you overnight. So when you arrive and you start your shift, you're starting a little further down that analytical path. And while we've strayed from some of change management, this cultural change is really a critical part, because our first step is going to be a giant step, because it's just going to be significantly different than what anyone's used to. And the team we have in place, there are people who, if they want to, could scuttle the whole effort. And that's really not an option. We need to be moving forward, and yet we have to bring along everybody with us. So right now we're focused, like I said, on the change agents, the communication plan. We're trying to work also with our front office to get them to understand both the angst that people will be experiencing and then the impact on performance metrics. So on one hand, yes, they can do more, but on the other hand, they're not going to initially do more. So how is that transition included? It's a big part, because obviously the IT system, no matter how important it is to the IT team, it's a tool for the operational teams.
All right, thanks for that, Heather. And Hannah, I think it's probably time for poll question number 2. If you could get that on everyone's screen, please. What is the most daunting part of the migration process? Having the conversation to begin migrating, preparing everything for the process, actually migrating to the cloud? All right, looks like preparing everything for the process, that those initial steps appear to be everyone's biggest concern. Interesting. Okay. Actually, to pivot here a little bit, we were talking already a little bit about some analytic capabilities, but I think just to drill into that a little bit deeper, does anyone want to unpack the aspect of the cloud being an enabler and a facilitator of automation?
Yeah, I could put some thoughts there. So
Okay.
yeah, so cloud, for the sake of doing cloud, has not been a thing for a while now, because every single agency has its own mission that they would like to do better, and they would like to get more return on investment from the top. So when they're actually migrating to the cloud, when they're actually doing a lot more assessments, establishing cloud business office, looking into the operational expenditure of the cloud, they are actually driving more into performance, and you could get more performance out of the cloud only by doing relentless automation and optimization on both fronts, whether it be assessing the applications themselves and the services that you're hosting there, or doing it pre-cloud migration, which is your 5 R's of migration: rehost, refactor, revise, rebuild, and replace. When you go through these things, you are actually sort of driving towards optimization. And when you get to the cloud, as almost every single one of the panelists mentioned, that Agile DevSecOps is one of their highest priorities. And that actually drives your automation and standardization with perhaps some sort of a service catalog, shared services model, so that at any given point in time, with a single glass pane window, which the business units are paying more for the similar services and which class of services are actually costing you more. So, optimization and establishing an oversight office to keep the alignment more fruitful for the business, for the mission, I think is what's been driving, more efficiency out of cloud implementations, or driving more applications to the cloud.
Okay, and Sid, I'll stay with you for just a moment longer here in terms of, guidance from the CIO Council or guidance elsewhere. What kind of North Stars should agencies count on in terms of getting ready for that cloud migration?
Yeah, no, excellent point. And CIO Council has been putting out all the lessons learned that we've had since we started the data center initiative, DCOA initiative, in 2016, and we've been doing a lot more migrations and assessments since Cloud Smart as well. So if you go to the CIO Council and go to their resources that are being offered there, you will see a lot more of the standardization language. You will see a lot more of the framework. Like, for example, most of your audience may know about the application rationalization framework. And this framework is particularly designed for agencies to go through the self-assessment and just go through the different stages of application rationalization. You identify the resources, you inventory what you have, all your assets, you assess the classification of the data underlying it, and then you quantify what gets to make it to the cloud, what gets to get re-architected, and then you prioritize what goes to the cloud. And eventually, going through these cycles of application rationalization, that's one of my biggest playbooks that actually follow every time cloud migration comes up. I think, okay, we need to do application rationalization that's relevant to this agency, whether it be in the entirety of it or a small part of it. I will link it here, and if you could, for folks that actually are not aware of the playbook, I will link it in the chat, and hopefully you can spread it to the or post it to the participants. But as a whole, I think the CIO Council's resource section is very rich, and I add this to what Skip mentioned earlier about the cloud information services at GSA. Also, most of the lessons learned there are coming from entire federal government experts that actually got together and curated all their lessons learned and curated what the best practices were in their implementations for over half a decade, and pretty much put it out there, whether it be acquisition, migration, cloud operational, day 2 operations, most importantly, and also operation expenditure models that you could actually adapt. Let me go fish for that link real quick while I pass it to someone else.
Okay, well, Sid, while you're looking for that link for everyone to take a look at, Hannah, let's go to the final poll question. Do you think your cloud services are secure? Yes, we think they are secure. No, we are not as secure as we should be. I'm not sure about the security process. Yes, we make sure they are secure at a resounding 70%. Okay, well, I think just with that in mind here, let's pivot the conversation to the security piece of things. I think you've all in various ways, made mention of the need to keep the data in the cloud secure. So, Conrad, I know you come from this, come to this conversation with a background in cybersecurity here. So just let's hear a little bit more about your perspectives on keeping the cloud secure.
Well, one of the things, especially in the beginning, as Sid noted, the 5 R's that you need to look at with respect to the data, you also need to understand, well, what's the classification of that data? What's the risk category for that data? Because that'll determine what the protection level, whether it's a low, moderate, or high system. The number of controls increases based on the rating level. But one of the things, especially from an operational from a cyber standpoint, the question is, what are the current activities that my SOC currently does for monitoring and ensuring the security of our system? And how is that going to be translated to the cloud? Because it's a shared model then. At the data center, I control everything and I answer all the questions. But in the shared model, there are specific controls that the cloud provider, the CSP, actually supports. And one of the other great opportunities in the way of changing the thinking of how security is done is leveraging the capabilities that the cloud provider offers in-house. Leverage their services and technologies. Don't just look at, okay, I have this product that I use in my physical data center and I want to deploy that to the cloud. There is so much in the way of experience that you can leverage, the technologies so that you can do all the analytics and the monitoring. They have that built and optimized for the cloud environments. So that needs to be the first place from a cyber defense aspect that you need to look to, leveraging the cloud-based resources that they have in place to support your operations, because that'll help you in terms of how is it that you're going to operationalize this data that supports this application. And you can also apply that across the board, because it's not a circumstance where everyone has just one cloud environment that they're supporting. There's not just one application deployed in one, AWS GovCloud, and that's it. There are quite a variety of cloud providers out there, and you need to be able to leverage to the fullest extent possible those resources to be able to inform you about the security posture of your cloud environments.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that as well. Conrad is exactly right. Protecting, security in the cloud or protecting federal information, especially with regards to cloud providers, is a team sport. And one thing that the cloud providers that we have come through Fedramp provide is a customer responsibility matrix to tell you what controls are the customer responsibility and which ones are being covered by the cloud provider. The other thing too, in maintaining the cybersecurity posture is continuous monitoring. Something that isn't talked about very much at cocktail parties that we go to, because it's not as fun, is the continuous monitoring aspect. Agencies, per FISMA, they sign out an ATO for their mission in the cloud, for their use of that cloud. But the important aspect is the continuous monitoring, to make sure to hold the cloud service provider accountable, to make sure that they're protecting federal information, like they're saying to protect your agency's information. That is an incredibly critical piece that again I don't think gets the love and attention that it needs to, but it's very important. Once the authorization is done, that's not it. We have to constantly make sure and be vigilant that our cloud providers are doing what they say they do. They're exceptional at what they do. Don't get me wrong, but again, it's a team sport to make sure that everybody's playing their role to make sure that federal information is protected.
And to Brian's point, And that's why for CMS, for the CMS cloud, that's a service that the organization provides for the business units that deploy to the CMS cloud. So we recognize this, the major significance of that monitoring, because if you don't monitor, you cannot, because I always tell people, when everyone asks me, well, is your system secure? I always have to answer, let me check. And that means I have to go to the logs, because I can find out tomorrow that I was compromised last month. But you need to be able to monitor and capture all that data and make a security assessment based on the activity that you're seeing. And that's a critical component, as Brian noted.
And just to throw in one business side of this, everything you've said is important. And let's face it, Fedramp was a game changer in terms of using the cloud. But one of the challenges that I've encountered, especially with bosses who are not technical, is setting realistic expectations. If you take a pile of garbage and all you do is move it from the iron in your data center to the cloud, you haven't accomplished what we've been trying to do, and you still have the same security vulnerabilities. So you might be in a more secure environment, might be incrementally more difficult. So set those expectations with the big guns, because if they're not understanding it, they're going to think one thing and you're delivering something else.
All right, well, that's a strong note to end on, Heather. And unfortunately, I think we're out of time here. So please, everyone, give the panelists a virtual round of applause here. They did a wonderful job. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, Hannah, we'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jory, and thank you to all of our panelists. That was an incredible panel, a great discussion. Up next, we'll be having our second panel of the day. For this panel, we'll be having Dave Nzepper moderating this panel. Dave is a tech reporter over at FedScoop. So Dave, please take it away.
Thank you, Hannah. Before we begin, I just want to encourage everyone in the audience to submit questions throughout. We're going to have a Q&A section towards the middle of the show today. So please get those in. Also remember to answer the poll questions as we go through to ensure that you get your CPE credits. I'm now going to introduce each of our panelists who I'd appreciate it if you gave a little wave as I say your name. Today we have a great panel. We have David Catanoso, Director of Enterprise Cloud Solutions Office of Information Technology at the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have Raghav Vajala, Chief Information Officer and Chief Data Officer at the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Federal Trade Commission. Ian Anderson, Lead DevSecOps Engineer for Secure Cloud Architecture and Automation at the Navy. And Nick Psaki, Principal Technologist with the Office of the CTO at Pure Storage. Thank you all for being here today. I think to kick things off, I'm just going to go down the list, and maybe you can give us a little bit of a primer on what's new at your agency, or for our industry folks, maybe you can give us a little bit of a primer on who you are, what you do, and what you're seeing in government. So David, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Dave Catanoso. I'm actually in a new role at the VA. I'm the acting director of the Application Hosting Cloud and Edge Solutions area, which includes our existing Enterprise Cloud Solutions Office, as well as our Platform One organization, the organization that's running our regional and national data centers, and our data center consolidation initiative, as well as some of our platform as a service type offerings, and some of even our SaaS offerings like ServiceNow. So we're consolidating all the like functions under one area to get better synergy and improve our modernization efforts, work together and provide a unified customer experience. For those that don't know much about the VA, just let me leave a little background. So the VA is the second largest federal agency. If budget were revenue, we'd be a Fortune 9 size organization. We have almost 500,000 staff members. We operate one of the largest integrated healthcare systems in the world. We have over 1,200 medical facilities, almost 150 of which are major medical centers, and a lot of outpatient clinics and small patient service areas around those hospitals. We also operate one of the largest insurance type organizations in the world with the Veterans Benefits Administration. That's over 50 field offices, and then one of the largest national cemeteries at over 140 national veteran cemeteries. And as you can imagine, we've got a tremendous amount of IT infrastructure to support and corporate infrastructure to support that large mission. Our IT organization is over 8,000 people, 60% of which are veterans. So we really take the mission of delivering world-class functionality and service to our staff and veterans very seriously. And IT modernization has been a big part of our CIO's mission for us over the last several years. We've taken advantage of cloud modernization as a big part of that. So happy to be here today and share VA's story.
Raghav, what's new at the FTC when it comes to the cloud and your cloud strategy?
So first of all, I just want to thank Dave for reminding me to how to, use a good comparisons to kind of explain what an agency does. So at the Federal Trade Commission, we're a law enforcement agency. If you counted how many attorneys we had, we'd be a top 50 law firm in the United States. And a big bulk of what we do is enforce antitrust, anti-competitive practice law enforcement for the country. And you need to give a sense of the technology challenges law enforcement organizations have. We probably, on a per person basis, probably dwarf what many other agencies do in terms of data transfers. And with every lawsuit out there, there's this thing called discovery, which is more and more seizing electronic information and records from whoever we're as a target of an investigation, or even internally. We ourselves have to turn over quite a bit of information as part of litigation hold practices. So several years ago, we realized we were just up against it. It was not possible to handle the large data transfers that were happening in the law enforcement realm, and still at the same time operate a federal data center. So, I've been here for 7 years, and nearly all of our environment is now software as a service or platform as a service. We still have some infrastructure as a service that we're hopefully, going to reduce over the next 6 months to a year. But I'd say the biggest thing for us is going forward, really, how do you operate when there really is no data center and everything is in a cloud provider somewhere? How do you secure that? How do you staff that? How do you maintain that? Even basic things like, relearning how to do upgrades to systems when you don't actually own the system. That's a big part of what's new here at the FTC, just trying to totally live entirely in cloud-based environments and manage change in that process.
Ian, what's new at the Navy?
Yes, so I am with Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren, and I work with the Naval Systems Engineering Resource Center, otherwise known as NSERC, and that is the cloud provider for the Warfare Center, as well out to any other federal entity that wants to come and work with us. We are a working capital fund, so we don't necessarily get money from the government to go out and do things. We rely on program offices, different projects to come to us to actually get our funding, get our projects. So it's a very interesting dynamic, especially set up within the Warfare Center, that you see a lot of those silos, especially within the departments. So being that service provider, not really, supporting a single project, but supporting a suite of tools, especially within the cloud environment, is proven to be very interesting at times. One of our big challenges, and I guess biggest opportunity right now, is with the kind of shutting down or scaling back of DI2E. A lot of projects that our Warfare Center, as well as other projects within the federal government and throughout the Navy, are looking for a platform to land. So, we provide the Atlassian tool set, but now you have to really take a look at how are we going to do this large data migration. Some projects have been in there for many years. So, how do we, bring their data in, ensure the integrity of their data, and then, as they continue to work within the environment, how do we keep that secure? Especially when you take a look at, are they wanting to work within the IL4 environment, or do they need an IL5, or do they need, an impact level higher than that? And, it especially gets very interesting, and, something the customer doesn't want to see is they have a lot of functionality on the unclassified side. They go to the classified side and they say, hey, why doesn't this function the same? Well, why isn't the data the same? How can we get something from the low side to the high side? So really taking a look at a lot of those challenges when it comes to being that service provider or tool provider to many projects, even some above our level at the NAVSEA headquarter level.
And last but not least, Nick, tell us about Pure Storage. Tell us what you're seeing in terms of cloud trends.
Thanks, Dave, and good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be with you all today. Listening across all the panelists, hearing exactly the same primary questions and drivers for movement to the cloud, the adoption of hybrid infrastructure, or the deployment of services across a hybrid infrastructure. And this is exactly the problem set that we seek to address at Pure Storage. And it really is about data services. When your primary focus is no longer infrastructure, you have to focus on the applications, the services, and the data, and the seamless movement, leverage, and protection of those resources in order to enable better agency functions, better outcomes, a faster and more dynamic data environment to support the operational environment that each of these agencies drive in. This is not a story unique to government, although the really unique characteristic to government is that scale and variety, it basically has no rivals. We've been doing information technology infrastructure literally since the inception of computers. There are agencies that have data holdings that literally go back a century. So modernizing that, bringing the data into the 21st century, and then adopting services on premises and off premises to enable the agency's mission is really the primary driver here. So our job is to make the tools that enable that facility with data, that leverage of that data, the protection of the data, and the security of the data, whether that's on premises or off premises, but also to make it seamless and uniform so that it's an uncomplicated process. Now, Ian touched on something that I think is very, very important. A lot of these applications predate modern infrastructure models, such as containerization, virtualization, and they're talking about databases that have been effectively the same for 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. And that poses some really unusual challenges for government agencies. Modern enterprises have the advantage of basically starting fresh, and depending on how old your company is. Government agencies have a tremendous amount of how does one say, additional process, statutory and regulatory compliance that has to be met for data integrity and data retention. All of these things are huge challenges, and that's what we seek to help address, especially as the government has made a tremendous push to modernize its infrastructure services and to provide better, more resilient, more reliable, and more responsive services to their customers.
Well, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into those strategies shortly. I want to start the Q&A section by pulling up our first poll question. Have you had a good experience with the cloud? Yes, I have. No, I have not. I think we could have a better experience with new strategies in place. All right, let's see the results of that. I want to ask our panelists, do these results seem to resonate with you? Is this what you're seeing at agencies? And how did you go about implementing your cloud strategy, or how should agencies implement their cloud strategy to optimize that experience? Anyone can chime in here.
I'll go first. This is Dave. So we have a pretty good experience with the cloud at VA. We've been very successful migrating apps. I mean, like any large organization, change is difficult. And getting staff up to speed and the training, making training available and people aware of the capabilities has probably been one of our harder challenges. The technology almost seems in some cases like it's the easy part. It's really the organizational change management, the change in approach and thinking that's been a bigger challenge, which we've successfully started to tackle. But that was probably the biggest challenge. But we've had a good experience with the actual cloud services themselves and using them to deliver functionality.
Yeah, I'd say the only place where I think we were surprised at what was hard was I think it was more change than we originally thought for the existing IT operational staff. I think there's that emotional crutch of having the keyboard next to you to do something that goes away. So I think there's a lot of that. Just to trusting something is going to get done without you being right there to see it happen. I think that's probably the biggest, mental hurdle for a lot of folks. But I don't think the results are otherwise surprising. I think, once we got through that part, generally there's a lot of satisfaction with where we are today.
Yes, and I know our experience with the cloud has been great. We do one of the things that we see kind of a resistance within the Navy is there are still some, I guess you would say, holdouts that say, well, my application shouldn't be in the cloud or it shouldn't move to the cloud. There are some cases where your application is not ready, but they kind of argue that it's going to be different and they're going to have to change a lot. So when we try to onboard projects, really kind of abstracted way, we say, what's the difference going to be if you're asking for a VM that sits in the cloud or a VM that's going to sit on-prem, and you get the lovely saying of, well, I can go walk down to this building and go see the server it's on. But really, is that really going to make a difference? Is that going to ease everybody's concerns that you can see the server? Or do you want to get the added benefits that the cloud can bring? And a lot of our customers really like the ability that, wow, we thought we needed this very large VM, but we're only using 3% of it. So can we scale that back, reduce the cost that we have? That flexibility and scalability, coupled with the monitoring that you can put in place, really has helped customers, save on resources, save on the cost. Or really find out that they do need more if the demand does get higher. They have the comfort to scale up. So we've had a great experience with our cloud adoption.
And Nick, can you talk a little bit about strategies that you're using when you work with your agency customers to make that experience more smooth?
Yeah, absolutely. At first, I wanted to say, I think the poll shows us something significant, and that we're really out of the trough of disillusionment that often accompanies the adoption of new technologies. So I think what we see now is a realization of what the cloud services do well and what we have to accommodate in a shared services infrastructure from a consumer standpoint. So the cloud services have matured, as well as our understanding of what it is and how it works. And I think that contributes greatly to the effective utilization of the as-a-service platform environments. So if the infrastructure is no longer a question, which is a lot of times a big driver to moving to cloud services or shared services, the focus then moves to the data and the desired outcomes and the ability to leverage that data and those applications across multiple cloud services. And I'm including the agency's organic service infrastructure into that concept, because really, once you adopt external shared services, you have a hybrid cloud. So you have to focus on portability, security, scalability, resiliency, reliability, and sharing the infrastructure or sharing the service platform for something like customer service, email, enterprise communications, or what have you. All these things still have the same architectural primary drivers that have to be considered to support the agency's operations, as well as compliance and security requirements. So you still have to think about, okay, how do I replicate this data? What happens if my primary site goes down? How do I do failover? Do I have adequate backup, data mobility, portability, and resiliency built into my shared service infrastructure? So those are a lot of the challenges that we see is, okay, now I've moved to the cloud, now what? And that's a lot of our focus has been on how do we drive uncomplicated data services in both on-premises and shared service infrastructure. And that's, across traditional virtualization, bare metal, and, modernized container services. And we have to be able to accommodate data in all three of those paradigms and across, block, file, and object type of data structures. So those are primary for us too. And then listening to our customers tell us what their challenges are, what their evolving security requirements are. Those are all things that drive how we develop our products in order to be able to support enterprise data services across large organizations.
Can we go ahead and pull up poll question 2? And while we're doing that, I'm going to remind everybody, please get in your questions as we go. I'm going to try and work Q&A from the audience in. Have you begun to implement these public, private, and multi-cloud strategies? Yes, We are working on one or more of these. We have begun to discuss a strategy, but have not implemented one. No, this is something we have not started. Let's get the results on that. All right, so by and large, 75% saying yes, they have started working on it. 19% say no. Still a pretty significant portion of people, not something they've started on. Nick, you touched already a little bit on starting this process and what agencies need to be thinking of, and you mentioned a little bit of the challenges, but what should agencies in that 19% really be prioritizing to kick off their cloud journey, and then maybe everybody else at the agencies can chime in on kind of how they started their process.
Sure. As I said, the data strategy becomes the primary driver for the service infrastructure adoption. What are we trying to do? How are we trying to do it? Do we, when we talk about cloud, what type of cloud does it have to be? In our conversation yesterday, we touched on, SaaS platforms. So is it an application or an application platform that I can simply adopt an existing service infrastructure? Or do I need to do infrastructure as a service or platform as a service to support, which sets of functional applications need to be delivered? So the data strategy should drive all of that. For application services, we're going to use X as a service. For data and infrastructure services, it may be something else. But how do we choose which flavor of cloud is going to support our agency's overarching mission and achieve the objectives of cost efficiency, scalability, resiliency, security, et cetera? That's actually the hard part, because as I believe it was Dave who said, and Ian, we're now doing something completely different. And the whole concept of letting go of certain critical operational functions is really difficult. Having the trust that the platform's going to work is and be responsive and dynamic to our changing needs. That's a big leap of faith, because fundamentally in government, the responsibility and accountability for successful delivery of the mission or the outcome or the agency's operations doesn't go away. So that doesn't translate over to the cloud service provider. That's still the responsibility of the agency leadership. And that's a hard thing to commit to, that level of trust in somebody else delivering the quality of service that is required for the agency's operations and mission to continue.
I liked that phrase, flavor of cloud. What flavor of cloud, David, maybe did your agency go with? And what drove that?
So first of all, for those agencies trying to start their journey, I would make sure one of the first things you're going to need is strong executive support and sponsorship. You need a champion. We benefited from that early on from the CIO level on down, and that's only gotten stronger ever since. And that really makes everything else easier, right? If you have that, you have a much better chance of being successful. As far as what flavor, the VA's had in the beginning a very hybrid multi-cloud environment. As you can imagine from what I described, we have a huge on-prem infrastructure that we integrate our cloud with. So right out of the gate, we're automatically hybrid. And then we pretty much focus on two primary CSPs for our VA enterprise cloud, where we're using direct CSP services to solve mission requirements. But we also use a very large number. I think we're up to almost 100 SaaS providers that are approved and published on the VA digital services website that explains, what ones are approved for use of the VA. So there's a lot of other cloud providers that work with the VA through SaaS offerings. So we've got a very hybrid multi-cloud environment that we use to deliver on our mission requirements. And I think many agencies are going to find the same thing. You're going to find a sweet spot that what works for your mission, what combination of cloud services you're going to need. It's going to vary.
Ian, let's go with you next.
Yeah, so our organization got in very early with the cloud. As the Navy started to really take a look at how can we utilize GovCloud. So we have a presence in both AWS and Microsoft Azure, as well as integrating our investments in the on-prem infrastructure. So having that hybrid solution. So we actually manage our own security stack for access to both of those clouds and around our on-prem infrastructure. So when we talk about and take a look at, especially for DoD agencies, The one thing you really need to look at is, who is going to be that, cloud service provider to you. But one of the big things that, we really want other organizations to take a look at, as they're researching into, that cloud service provider, what are the costs going to be associated with that? You see a lot of cost actually, sometimes, doubling with some of the cloud service providers. So, one of the big things that I like to express is really research into, if you were to go to a cloud service provider and, actually start up a couple of VMs, what does that cost look like? But what does the, other fees and other percentages on top of that going to look like? Because you then have to turn around, possibly add on your fees to provide out services to your organization. And, that may start to actually turn customers away from the cloud, is that high cost. So that's one of the biggest things I see right now, especially for, within the Navy and DoD organizations, as, being a turn away for, cloud adoption is those kind of extra fees put on top, not really the, can I move my applications into the cloud, or at least prepare them to move it.
What about you, Raghav?
So when we would discuss, why go to the cloud, or why do anything different, I think I don't think I ever really started with a technology discussion. I always started from the HR side. So many years ago, that to me it was pretty apparent that there was no one graduating school who wanted to be an on-premise Exchange administrator. I mean, that just wasn't happening. So we always were gearing everything to, what did the market have to offer in terms of skills, and what's the best way to build an environment to attract the people with the best skills. So that's really what allowed us to get a lot of headway in the organization and think about, putting stuff into the cloud and building, revisiting all the internal agency practices for budgeting and for procurement that may have put the burden of proof on anyone who wanted to try something new, and just reshifting all those little internal levers to put the burden of proof on someone who wants to keep it the same. And it has huge, ripple effects, when you start doing that. And you really, where we are now, I think we're trying to get to a point where we can trust the customers to define their own, digital experience with all the different platforms that we have, and really empower them wherever we can. And but really, that's what we always start with. What are the skill sets out there in the market that we want to bring in? What do we want to have internally that's going to attract them? And we've always landed with, okay, let's further invest in the cloud, because that seemed to be the right way to create an environment that's really going to bring in good, solid people into the organization.
We actually just got in a question for you that I'm going to ask now. I recently read that the FTC was awarded TMF funds for SOC as a service. Have you started writing requirements and work statements for this initiative?
Yes, absolutely. We have started writing. Obviously, we would not have gotten the award, I think, from GSA if we did not, have some ideas and thoughts to share and what we thought we were going to go out there and pursue in the market. The way we presented our ideas to GSA is that, we thought the timing was right to reimagine what a multi-cloud environment entailed for how you think about a SOC. What does it mean if you don't have a standardized data center to be your central collecting agent for the SOC? What if the vast bulk of all your data and all your network transactions are happening outside of your perimeter? And that's what we discussed with the Technology Modernization Fund. And now we're in process of, completing those write-ups and hopefully putting it out to market over the next couple months. I think, kind of the same way that I just explained about, those what we talk about an on-premise Exchange administrator. I think the way we think about security, personnel and how they're protecting your network. Well, what happens if someday there is no network to protect, and there is, just as Nick says, there's just data. So how would you imagine setting up your security defenses, with that in mind? So that was like kind of the, rough high level things that we were, contemplating when we went in front of the TMF.
I know the easy answer to my next question is going to be it depends on the agency, but I'd like to know from all of you, how many clouds is too many? How do you come to the determination of how many clouds you're going to run with in your multi-cloud environment? What sort of variables and factors come into play? Let's start with you, Ian.
Yes. So, obviously, one thing that we like to, put out there, we're not just going and aiming for one cloud. And, if you don't like it, sorry, this is what we're going to use. We like to have that, multi-cloud option and, hybrid cloud option. And then you start to look at, some of these software as a service in the various other clouds, and can get an infinite number of, different clouds out there that you're either connecting to or consuming or even having to manage. For us, we like to really, especially on the software as a service side, being a DoD entity, a lot of the protections and, especially monitoring that has to go around it. So we normally try to aim for doing a platform as a service. We actually bring in the application, host it, on a platform, and we, our organization will provide it out as kind of a software as a service. So that way we have all of the, protections in place that we need, especially as you start going up the impact level ladder in, the customer needs.
Did you find something similar at your agency, David?
So, we're constantly evaluating our requirements in terms of number of clouds and which software as a service providers to leverage. Like I said, we already leverage 2 right now in our enterprise cloud, and as well as almost 100 in our SaaS providers. And it's really based on mission requirements. Currently, we think 2 is a sweet spot, but if a mission requirement appears in the future where another cloud needs to be added, we're capable of doing that when the mission and the funding is there to do it. At the same time, you have a point of diminishing returns in terms of training of staff and ability to effectively manage more and more technical debt across these different environments. So it's kind of trying to find a balancing point that gives you the optimal efficiency, and that's where we look at all the time.
Raghav, is that what you're finding as well?
I think I'll break it up into if it's for software as a service or platform as a service, it's as many people as you can find to be authorization officials and system owners. I think it's really easy to be flexible on those platforms, provided you have the right, number of people and time for the system oversight. I think infrastructure services, as David alluded to, I think it's a little more complicated, because you need enough skills to not only do the authorizations, but all the budgeting, all the license management. It's much more comprehensive set of skills and people you need. So I think we're probably in the same zone that David and VA landed at. As 2 is a good comfortable number for infrastructure service clouds, and getting the most out of them means putting together expertise on budgeting and license expertise. But hey, if it turns out that there's something new out there, we're going to always follow what the mission requirements are.
Nick, from the industry side of things, how do you kind of help agencies come up with that equation for what's the right fit for them?
Well, cloud rationalization is sort of the ongoing figuring it out, as Dave and Raghav both said. Our job is to enable the leverage of the data across whichever platform you're choosing. So, this is one of the reasons, particularly in containers, that something like Portworx and other container service infrastructure and storage platforms are so important, because that's what enables the mobility and portability of the data and applications across cloud environments seamlessly. And there's also how do you connect on-premises to off-premises so that those boundaries disappear as well. And that really comes down to, what's your data fabric and what's your data strategy look like, and what are the enabling capabilities between your on-premises and your cloud service provider look like. And even if you think about it, from cloud to cloud is simply translating from one infrastructure to another. And it's technologically the same thing as moving from on-premises to the cloud. You're just now shifting natively from a cloud platform to another cloud platform. But what are the mechanisms for doing that? And we we focus tremendously on how do we enable that data mobility seamlessly in an automated fashion so that it doesn't require any user intervention to be able to facilitate that translation of data from place to place.
Sticking with you, if you're looking at sort of that seamless transfer across government as a whole, how well do you think agencies have that in hand? And then we can go to the different agency experts, but I'm curious, do you think that government still has a long way to go on that front? What are you seeing?
Now, yes and no. So to Raghav's point, it really is about the talent that you hire in order to drive these processes. There's a tremendous amount of capability built into modern software and hardware infrastructure platforms that facilitate this kind of data movement. The other factor is, of course, network. So all this stuff ultimately moves on something. And when you're trying to move petabytes of data, it becomes cumbersome and it can become very delicate. So those are all, factors that have to be accounted for, but really, do the people that we have the skill set and awareness to understand how to move large quantities of data, oftentimes while it's being leveraged by application services and end users, non-disruptively, seamlessly. And those are huge drivers to what we do in developing our data service platforms.
At your respective agencies, how would you rate sort of data transfer currently across clouds and your interoperability? Raghav?
In terms of rating,
He froze up. Hopefully we get this.
I can jump in while we're waiting for him to come
Perfect.
back. So at the VA, we're largely today, we have a large footprint. So our operations span from, Puerto Rico to the Philippines, from Anchorage down to St. Thomas. So we're pretty wide footprint. We got users everywhere, basically. So latency is a factor in terms of access to data. And so we optimize on application performance and data gravity largely. But we're starting to explore where we can make data available in multiple cloud locations and on-prem, so it can be reached from multiple locations, and also starting to look at what makes sense to be, portable and can move between locations. So that's all stuff we're starting to get smart on as we mature our use of the cloud and use of the technology to get more and more cloud native, containerization, those kinds of things that make that possible. But largely you're limited by the ability, the large amounts of data to move and to perform well from an application standpoint when you're accessing it, right? So those are some of the challenges we have to face to make sure our users have performance systems.
Ian, what about you?
Yes, I still think we have especially within the DoD, a long way to go when it comes to that data portability. One of the things that I see becoming possibly a headache, possibly an issue in the future is things like the F-35. That's not an Air Force system. It's not just a Navy system. It's a joint system. So how, if I wanted to collaborate with the Air Force, I wanted to collaborate with, another agency, how do we get that data portability? And, what does that transfer of data look like? Are we going to have to create an environment, where that's shared between those agencies, or is there another mechanism that we can use to share between environments, which is secure and also efficient? We don't want to take 3 years to transfer whatever amount of data. So I see that being one of the big issues in the future. And then just even within the agency, that that transfer of data from a lower classification to a higher classification. One of the other issues I see is, especially with the power of the cloud and the various services out there, especially in artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those things. I think security is going to have a bigger headache of, when we start implementing, bringing data sets together, what does the classification look like? If it goes up to, a higher classification, are those services still FedRAMP approved? Can that still happen? Or is it kind of dead in the water now? So I see a lot of, there's a lot of great things happening right now, but still a lot to overcome in the future.
My next question is, has it been difficult finding vendors that are willing or capable of supporting the multi-cloud environments that you've stood up? David?
We've got a lot of vendor interest in supporting us at VA for both our major cloud providers in the VAEC, as well as our SaaS solutions. And we've kind of separated the responsibilities, where we buy, our capacity and our tools on one set of vehicles, but we separate our support contracts separately so that we eliminate any conflict of interest, but we also get the specialized skills where we need them to help accomplish the VA mission, right? So we kind of attack it that way. But certainly there's a lot of great help available in industry. We partner well with our contractors. They become part of our team essentially and help us deliver the capability to the veteran, right, ultimately.
Yeah, so we have great partnerships with all of our contractors that work with us. A lot of the vendors that we are working with, none are, well, we put this on AWS and that's the only thing you have to put it on. As long as the need is there, if they haven't already designed it, they are willing to work with us to get it in the correct environment. I know we work a lot with the vendors because our cloud environment is a network denied environment. Nothing can actually reach into it or reach out. So we do have a lot of issues when we bring software or a product within that environment, and the vendors, contractors, whoever it may be, are always willing to work with us to understand our requirements when it comes to security and how we have our environment set up, and to really work through that to get their products working as expected.
Next, I wanted to ask a question about Fedramp. As you all know, it may finally be institutionalized in the new NDAA that's come out. Obviously, that has to get passed, but I'm curious, are you watching that development, and would it be a relief, or would you have concerns seeing the Fedramp program finally codified? David?
We're watching it closely and are looking forward to the outcome. I think it'll be a positive development. And Fedramp's been a major part of how we're able to get to the cloud, and we leverage it heavily in terms of security control inheritance and speeding up our ATO process and maintaining our environments. So we're definitely a fan of it and looking forward to see how this role plays out.
Nick, from the industry side of things, would it be a relief? Do you have any hangups?
This is one of those, it remains to be seen. How tightly are they going to define or circumscribe what Fedramp validation looks like, or how much broad agency tailoring is going to be facilitated by the law. The challenge, the benefit of regulatory implementation is that regulations can be amended or adapted as time goes by pretty readily, but legislation can have the effect of making things more, how does one say, brittle or rigid. So I'm looking forward to seeing the particular language of the legislation and what kind of latitude it facilitates for agencies to be able to tailor their Fedramp validation requirements, make them more stringent or make them relaxed, or what levels of Fedramp validation are provided for in the legislation. This is always tricky. In industry, we agree there needs to be a canonical standard of cloud security, and Fedramp provides that at the national level and is subsequently being adopted across states, and particularly also, of course, by contractors in industry. So, this is one of those, we're encouraged, but we're also cautious, just because the effects of legislation can often be unforeseen or unpredictable. On the whole, we believe it's a good thing.
I'd like to take the time to get the last poll question that we have up. Do you think you can achieve full benefits with a multi-cloud environment in place? Yes, no, not yet. Let's get the results on that. 64% say yes, 36% say not yet. No no's, which is very positive. I guess among the not yets, what do you see as some of the biggest hangups that might be limiting some agencies? Nick, let's start with you.
limitations on experiencing the full benefits of a multi-cloud environment. Dave touched on some of them. Okay, which environment? How many environments? Having a plethora or a multitude of cloud platforms doesn't necessarily entail benefit natively. There are things that simply will never move to the cloud. And that's the nature of the data or the operations of a given agency, or it could be the inability of the cloud service to be replicated, or the on-premises service to be replicated in the cloud. And then there's the evolution and understanding of cost models, technology models. All of these things are, they evolve as time goes by. So while there may not be parallel cloud services to replicate on-premises services today, the evolution of that is undoubtedly going to come in the future. So it's there is no panacea in IT. We have developed specific services and specific systems and infrastructures to support specific operations over time. I think that the cloud provides us a tremendous opportunity to level set our IT infrastructure, to make it more homogeneous, to make it more common. I wanted to shy away from saying commodity, but it gives us a chance to make a platform off of which government can scale well into the future. But we'll always have those pockets of things that are simply going to have to reside where they are, or in a similar type of paradigm, to use the word properly, as they've been deployed in the past, because that's what they're uniquely suited for.
Raghav, welcome back. How is your agency sort of trying to, what's your cloud picture moving forward in terms of how you're trying to maximize those benefits?
I think the biggest thing is that we're just going to, we really want to master understanding how to, as every cloud vendor moves more and more features into their cloud environments, how to take advantage of that as soon as possible. I think especially on the, actually across all the different types of flavors of cloud, all the vendors are putting all their R&D into releasing new features on those environments. So for us, a big part of it is, just keeping up and turning on that stuff that just got released and trying to understand how to make the most of it. And it's probably a lot more effort on our understanding of our subscription licenses as much as anything else. So to get the most out of the investments that we have made, especially after having gone through the initial ATOs and ATUs for so many of our services. Now that we're in there, with all these different hybrid environments, multi-cloud environments. We want to make sure we're getting the most out of the licenses and acquisitions that we've made.
David and Ian, how are your future states in the cloud? How will those maximize benefits in your opinion?
So from a VA perspective, we're really all about IT modernization and digital transformation at this point to make sure we provide world-class experience to our veterans, same as they would get at any world-class commercial entity. Our government applications and tools should be no different, and our veterans should get the same kinds of things they're used to getting when they're not dealing with the VA, right? So that's really what we're trying to enable with the cloud. We're going to be really focusing on maturing our usage of the cloud, getting more automation, more process improvement, better use of the different containerization technologies with our platform one, leveraging as much as possible to enable our development teams and our ultimately provide better services to our staff and veterans. That's really what we're focused on at this point. We've overcome the can we go to the cloud. Now it's how do we get the most out of it.
Yes, definitely. Same for us as well. Kind of, what does it look like, to the future for us? And, kind of summing up what, is really been spoken of. I think one of the big things is, do we have the workforce and the experience to not do what's been done on-prem, to come into the cloud and do it in a more efficient, better way, so that we can maximize those costs, maximize, the power of the cloud. So, really for us is, can we get the right people in the right places to, set up our, networks within the cloud, set up, those services that we provide out. And then the other big thing for us is also kind of that procurement, perspective. How do we procure things in the cloud? The government likes to really plan for fiscal years, but when you have something dynamic like the cloud, how do you plan for some of those shifts, in the cost as maybe usage goes up or usage goes down? Or if you are procuring licenses, can we work with those vendors to come up with, better ways for us to, instead of buying a year-long license, buy maybe a 3-year license or something like that to, kind of ease those burdens that we're currently seeing within our organization.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I want to thank all of you for joining us today and giving your insights. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. I'm going to turn things back over to Hannah.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave and panelists. That was a great panel full of so much insight. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you again to Pure Storage for partnering with us on this, and to our amazing panelists, moderators, and our keynote. Before you head out, there is one final poll question about getting your CPE credits. If you'd like to receive CPE credits for this event, please answer the polling question. Also, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next event, a webinar on Thursday, July 21st, Stronger Together, How to Empower Federal Agencies Against Cybersecurity. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.